Now, all right, see if anybody is actually online and can tell me if the sound is any good. Okay, everybody, can you hear me and is the sound okay? Okay, let's do this. All right, had to revert to my old laptop. It looks like we have sound. So if I'm having to squint down at the monitor, it's essentially because I'm using my old laptop and the screen is super small. Okay, start one more time. Welcome to a live review of the Moses W950 front wing. Again, if you haven't done so already, please click the subscribe button and also click the bell to be notified of any new content on the channel. If you want to support my channel, you can always buy me a coffee. The link is in the description below. So let's go. The W950 is a new front wing for the surf setup for the 710 surf fuselage. It's also compatible to the old 745 fuselage and the Windsurf 900 fuselage. It has a span of 950 millimeters, 95 centimeters. That's clear. It has a chord that's leading edge to trailing edge, a max chord of 18.5 centimeters. That's 185 millimeters. And it has a listed aspect ratio of 6.3, I believe. It weighs just under a kilo, and it gets delivered with the new titanium M6 screws that Moses started using recently. So, what is this wing designed to do? It is basically the smaller brother of the W1100, which has been a very popular winging and surf foiling wing, especially in light winds. But a lot of people had a bit of a complaint that it was a bit slow for when the waves got a bit bigger and people wanted to go faster. So this is where the W950 comes in. So again, the W950 is basically just a smaller W1100. You can sort of see that it's got a similar aspect ratio layout. It has the downturned winglets. It has sort of the downturned gull wing shape that the 1100 also has. A question I get asked quite a bit is, how does this compare to the W790? Because those are very similar on the surface area, on the sides. This is 1,600, and the W790 is at 1,550. This being obviously a higher aspect wing. At an aspect ratio of about 6 makes a sort of a medium aspect wing, so it can get going in quite low speeds, and also can still reach moderately high speeds. Now, I've been using this mainly on the 82 centimeter surf mast and my project Cedrus 85, which is however 95 once the adapter is on. Setting wise, I found that even though it is scaled from the 1100, it has more front foot pressure. So it wants to be set a little bit farther back in the tracks than you would set up your 1100. What I also found is that where I normally would prefer, especially in light wind, the 450 stabilizer with the 1100, I did not like it with the 950. It gave quite a lot of foot pressure and made it all very stiff. For a beginner, that could actually be quite okay, as the 450 made it a super stable setup, but it made it difficult to pump and a bit difficult to turn. So I found my sort of favorite all-round stabilizer setup for that is with the 483 stabilizer. Also had quite a lot of fun with the race stabilizers, the 421 and the 400. Obviously, those are stabilizers for the kite fuselage, so you do end up with a bit of a gap here when you install those. But those will give you a lot more speed and will allow you to mount the foil slightly farther forward, which is also useful, especially if you're doing wing freestyle, any type of jumping. On the construction side, it is slightly thinner than the W1100. So you can see there's a fair bit of fairing going on here on the pedestal where the wing is mounted to the fuselage. This is to strengthen that area. I've been jumping and freestyling with this a lot with the wing. So a lot of hard landings, hard crashes at weird angles, and hasn't cracked anything, hasn't broken anything. I haven't torn out any of the screws just yet. I've been foil surfing with it, and I've got my usual dings on the reef here on the wingtips. The wingtips are quite thin, just like on the W1000. So if you do smack it into a rock, you are going to end up with a little bit of damage there, which would need repairing. But otherwise, the wing is super strong and can really take jumping the bigger boards from winging. Okay, speed-wise, it is a good speed increase over the W1100. It is slightly faster than the 790, so it's definitely an improvement on that side. However, you shouldn't expect this to be as fast as a real high aspect wing. For example, my favorite wing actually for speed and stuff like that, the W1000 from Moses. That has an aspect ratio of 10, so obviously a lot more lift to drag and allows for a bit more speed and more control at that speed. The sort of good speed range I found for the 950 is anywhere between 10 and about 30 knots. It can handle those speeds pretty well. Obviously, anything over the 25 knot range can get a bit demanding as the front foot pressure builds up quite a bit on this. It, however, doesn't get curly or out of control when it's going that fast. On bigger waves, it has more than enough speed to stay on the wave face and to give you good turns. You have to be a bit careful on the turns, as obviously the winglet style tips, when they breach, they can actually ventilate a little bit. With enough back foot pressure, you can push out that ventilation, obviously, but it is not as easy, for example, on a wing that doesn't have these, like the 1000. Jumping performance is great. It gives a really nice, good acceleration to actually eject out of the water. And it's actually still small enough that when you sort of land wrong or badly, that it doesn't put too much pressure up against the board to damage the board or tweak your ankles. So this makes it actually quite nice light wind freestyle option. Light wind or very low speed riding, it does not overlap so much with the 1100. The 1100 still beats it quite a lot for a normal weight rider. Like, I'm 85 kilos. I need at least 10 knots for this to work for me well. Whereas on 1100, I can get away and get riding in 6 knots, and at 8 knots, I'm fairly comfortable in staying up without too much of hard work. The 950, I can make it go up in about 8 knots, but it is a bit hard work keeping it riding. It is a wing that just needs a little bit more power. It's the same when pumping it, when surf foiling. As long as you can keep up the speed, it's good. But if you make any small mistake and you lose that speed, it can stall a lot quicker than the 1100. So the 1100 is still the easier pumper in that respect, especially if you don't have a very sensitive foot for pumping just yet. But if you can keep up the speed, the 950 will reward you with a bit more distance when you are pumping. So somebody who's very good at pumping can actually get more out of the 950. However, if you make a mistake again, if you slow down too much, it will stall out and it won't allow you to get back on the pump like the 1100 can. Yes, so if you guys have any questions really about that, I'm happy to talk about it. So what else? Talked about, I mean, the mast I've used it on. I wouldn't really recommend using this on the Kite mast. It's still a pretty big front wing. The 91 and the 101 are just too flexible for winging with this. People always ask, can you kite with this? I mean, yes, obviously. I mean, I quite a lot with the 792. Just that I would prefer still the 790 to the 950 for kite foiling. It's mainly for the fact is the high span on the 950. It reduces your options for tricks when you're free riding and when you're carving. Obviously, with kite foiling, we don't need so much surface area, and the span, so it can be done, and heavy riders can really take advantage of the light wind prowess of this, but it's not really necessary for a normal weight rider to use a wing of this size for kite foiling. Can you wing foil with it? Of course you can. Can you wind foil with it? Of course you can. It fits on the 900 fuselage. I had 1 or 2 sessions wind foiling with it. It gets going super early. If you have a 6.5 free race or cambered sail, you can get going in 6-7 knots with this easy, and it's super fun because it's really nice and fast. Roberto Fariz asked about the turning. The turning is pretty good. It is still a fairly high span wing with fairly long fuselage, so you can yaw it around quite tight, but if you carve it around, you need to do a slightly larger radius than, for example, the 633 or the 790. And definitely not as fast a turner as the W800 and the W1000. But then again, that's a different range. It definitely turns a lot faster and a lot tighter than the 1100. Again, if you change the back wing, if you change it for the 421 or the brain's not working, for the 421 or the 400, it gets a lot more agile, that too. But you do lose a bit of that pumpability, in my opinion. What is the point of this wing? Okay, Mike is asking, not exactly clear. What is the point of this wing? What gap does it fill? Also considering the W area is 2100 versus 1600. That's a good question. Now, first, I'd like to answer the thing about the surface area. A lot of people who know me know this. I'm going to say this about 1,000 times. Surface area on foils means nothing or next to nothing. It's a almost useless metric to compare foils, especially within brands with other brands. It basically, you're giving a surface area of a flat piece of paper where this is a profiled wing. So you can't really compare the 2,100 square centimeters of the 1,100 to the 950s, 1,600. It's not a fair representation that scales. So the point of this wing is for people who found the 1,100 too slow and they were looking for something faster, and that were not happy with the top end speed or low end of the 790, this is what the 950 is for. The 950 is essentially slightly larger than the 790 with a higher aspect ratio, which gives it a lot more speed potential, so less resistance, so more lift to drag, and allows for a bit of a nicer ride, especially for winging and wind foiling and surf foiling. I also heard rumors essentially that the 790 is going to be replaced by the 950. Not really sure if that's true. Jimmy hasn't told me anything about that. Mark Stoffel, when do you ride the 790 and when this one? Honestly, for winging, I don't ride the 790 anymore. I very much, for winging, my main wings for Moses that I go to now are the 1100 for really light wind, the 950 for any winds over like 12 knots. And then if it goes over like 16, 17 knots, I'm on the W1000. So the 790 doesn't really fit into my quiver anymore. I haven't used it in a while. I just used it now to do comparative tests between the 950 and the 790. Where I still use the 790 a little bit is really light wing kite foiling when I do free riding and so on. There, it's still one of my favorite wings for carving and jumping and so on, because it has a slightly less span, and that allows me to do a bit of tighter turning on the kite foil. Can I ride the 950 with the M91 and a small board? You can, but the 91 mast is very flexible, and with the large span wings like these, you're going to notice that flex quite a bit, especially on a small board. It's not impossible, but it's not a great ride. It's better to have the stiffer mast. Hello, do you have inertia in the bends? Not quite sure what you mean there, Benoit. I'm assuming you mean momentum. You have inertia. So I mean, do you have momentum? Or do you mean that it glides through the turns? Yes, it glides through the turns very well. It has actually a similar feel on the glide, sort of in the flat glide when you're not carving hard, close to the 1100. Can you compare the types of turn between the 790 and the 950? Okay, they're actually quite similar. I would actually say that the 790 can turn a bit tighter, mainly because it's a less span wing, is sort of less wide. However, it doesn't carry as much glide through the turns. So especially for freestyle and sort of longer turns, the 950 sort of wins because it has more glide and it keeps you up during those turns, whereas the 790 allows for a little bit tighter turning, which is quite actually nice on waves. But that is sort of a slight thing. I prefer to have sort of a mix between glide and tight turning. So that's why I put a smaller stabilizer on the 950, and it gets very close to the 790's turning radius while keeping quite a lot of glide. Can you use the 950 on the same fuselage as the 1000? No. The W1000 is on the Kite fuselage, the 647, and that is not going to work to put the 950 on there, because that is made for the 710 fuselages, and those are obviously got a much larger area connection, plus the screws are on a different separation. Okay. Do you expect a surfish wing under it, like the 1300? Yes, Jimmy has promised to send me the new 940, which is pretty much going to be exactly that. The way that wing looks, I think we've all seen that picture on Jimmy's Instagram. That looks like a quite nice wing for surf foiling. I'm not quite sure what the profile looks on that, but judging that it's specifically for surf foiling and stuff like that, it will be quite agile, but it won't be too fast. Okay, Inigo is asking about the stab. I already covered that, but I'll do it again. If you're looking for like an all-round sort of easy ride with still some decent speed, I prefer the 483, which I have on here. If I'm looking for a bit more speed, especially for jumping, I'll put on the race stabilizer, the 421. And if I'm looking for speed and surf, like a bit of a larger wave, and I want a bit more turning, I'll use the S400. And the 450, I wouldn't use at all with the 950. It's a bit stiff. Unless you're a heavier rider or a beginner and you really want a super stable ride, it's almost overstable with the 450, then that can also work for you. But I'd really recommend for most people, the 483 should be the go-to stabilizer. What do I think about the glide with this 950? Much better than the 790? Yes, definitely, Benoit. It is a much nicer glide than on the 790. It's just a slightly higher aspect ratio. So that's definitely to be expected anyway. And it's quite nice for that. Any info of the roadmap W490 and smaller? Like I said, I told you I don't know much. I've seen the picture, and Jimmy has promised to send me one to test, so I'll have more information once that actually gets here, and I can have a few rides on that. Okay. So while waiting for some more questions, what else can I say about it? There's not really much else I can say. I mean, we've covered masts, we've covered stabilizers. I mean, position on the board, like I already said, I think. I'm not sure if it was in this attempt or not. I set the 950 about 3 centimeters farther towards the tail compared to the same setup on the W1100. Is it good for small waves? Yes, it's good for small waves too, because it's got quite a lot of glide and it's got a decent amount of pumpability. So it's great for that. And it's also really good in big waves. I've been in fairly large waves with it, up to 1.5 overhead, and it still works for that. Although honestly, in anything over shoulder or head high, I would prefer to use a faster foil like the W1000. $950 versus the 633 on wing. I mean, they're worlds apart. The 633 at my weight, I need at least minimum 20 knots for that to work, whereas the 950 gets going a lot earlier than that. It obviously has a lot more glide. What is fun about the 633 is when you have enough power jumping with it, it's a very nice wing to practice rotations with and so on, because it's got a very small profile compared to this. So when you land, it sinks in a bit more, and it's a nice ride for that, but it needs quite a lot of power to get going. In waves, it's quite nice and fun. It's very turny, but again, it's missing that glide. So unless it's a fairly large wave, you're going to get bumped off of it fairly quick unless you can really push into it and keep pumping and staying on the wave. So again, very different foils that are worlds apart. Yeah, I heard that rumor too, that they might be changing to M8 things. I don't know much more than you guys, but obviously, if they do change to M8 screws, that would pretty much invalidate any of the current products in that respect. In theory, you can drill open the front wings and the stabilizers. That would shouldn't be a problem. I know quite a few people have done it, as long as there's enough hard material by the screw holes, that's fine. You should, however, let somebody who knows what they're doing do it, because you're going to have to put a bit of epoxy around where you've basically faired out the hole, and essentially also the countersinking. That's the biggest part of the MA, so that the wing won't take on water and eventually break. But like I said, if Moses changes to M8 hardware, that would mean you have to have a new fuselage, and in theory, you have to modify or get new front wings. Dock starting and pumping with the 950. I haven't had a chance to try that here at Fuerteventura. We don't really have easy dock starting places, and we really haven't had any nice flat water conditions to do it. But just judging from its pumping performance when surf oiling and so on, it's okay. It isn't the best at it. It's got a fairly thin profile for that type of slow speed pumping. So if you have an advanced level for pumping, it's quite nice. You can get decent speed out of it, but it is not a very easy wing to pump foil basically off a dock. Low end, Frankie was asking the low end of the 950 compared to the 1100. Covered that a while back, but basically for me, with 85 kilos and my skill level on my board, I can make the 1100 get going in 6 knots, and I like basically between 8 and 10 knots. That's sort of a good range for me, my low end of the 1100, and I need a little bit over 10 knots for the 950 to comfortably work. I can force it up in about 8 knots, but preferably anything over 10 for the 950. Okay. All right. Well, we're approaching almost half an hour, so unless somebody's got another question, I will probably end the video here. So, okay. All right. Well, we got some more. Oh, okay. Wait, Frankie boys. Okay, the W1000 compared to the 950. All right. That is actually a better question. The low end of, like I said, the 950, I need just over 10 knots for this to work. I need about 15 knots for the W1000 to work, and it's really fun actually over that. So 16, 17 knots up to 20, up to 25 knots. That's sort of my sweet spot for the 1000, and my sweet spot essentially for the 950 is about say 12 knots to 17 knots. That's when it's really fun. And if we're talking surfing, surf oiling, I need decent size swell for the 1000. I need something at least hip to shoulder high for the 1000 to work, whereas the 950 works in anything about 1 foot to whatever. Okay. Okay, so any more questions? All right. So, well, then I'm going to end it here. So thanks for watching. So again, just summarizing, the 950 is a sort of a nice, sort of smaller brother to the 1100. It doesn't really replace the 1100 as a really light wind wing, especially for winging nowadays. You can get away with it as a light wind wing if you are under 75 kilos. There you do have a bit of an overlap, but on anybody with normal weight like me, 85, 90 kilos, something like that, you still need the 1100 or like a bigger foil for those really light wind conditions that are, starting under 10 knots to about 15 knots. And then you have the 950 for almost everything else. The 950 is a wing that will carry you to most conditions on that. So yeah, it is super durable. I haven't managed to break it, and trust me, I've been trying. I've been crashing a lot while learning some new tricks with winging. So you can trust the durability in that. The titanium screws seem to be doing their job on this too. So if you own a 1100 and you're looking to replace your 790, or you're looking for something a little bit faster to cover the upper wind range for winging, or for wind foiling, and if you are actually looking for really nice surf wing, it can actually, for surf foiling and for subfoiling, you can get away with this actually as a one foil solution. Okay. Thanks for watching, and really thank you for bearing with me with the sound issue. I really got to try to figure out what's going on there. And again, remember to subscribe to the channel, click that bell. Thanks for watching. See you guys on the water. Rock on.